Ryder. Welcome back. How you doing?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Really
Yes,
appreciate it.
sir. Welcome back. It's great to have you. It's been a little while. Looking forward to this one. We're going to be talking about you and Jay Widener's latest film, A Clockwork Shining. And this presents the possibility that Stanley Kubrick may have intentionally altered the script from being about Jack Nicholson and his family acting as caretakers to a haunted hotel to possibly exposing aspects of the CIA MK Ultra mind control program. Now, The Shining was definitely one of my favorite movies growing up. It still is, and I never really even thought about it remotely in this way. I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch it again very closely. This is going to be very interesting. Looking forward to getting your insights into this. It's been a while since you've been on. Remind the audience a little bit about yourself and let them know where they can find you.
You can find me on Raised by Giants on YouTube and any and all podcast platforms. You can reach out to me personally on Twitter X at Raised by Giants 8 and on Instagram at Raised by Giants Pod. And yeah, this movie was really a passion project because, as you know, Chris, this was the first movie that I wanted to do. I wanted to do this one before JFK X, me and Jay Widener's first documentary, and we decided to do JFKX first, and which is a good thing because I got to cut my teeth on a different kind of documentary before we did this one, because this one required a lot more work. I worked on this one for like 6 months, and it's a really big passion project. And there's so many different theories surrounding The Shining. I mean, people have dissected The Shining over and over and over again. I mean, you can get on YouTube and just like type in Shining theories and you can watch for hours and hours and hours. And that was the thing with me, was when I was watching it, I was like, what can I find within this movie that people haven't already seen? Because there's there's theories that that it's all inside Jack's head, that it's all inside Wendy's. It's a crazy amount of theories, and I'm watching it and I'm seeing all these continuity errors that a lot of people have already pointed out within the movie. The Shining is probably the one movie that has the most continuity errors out of any other movie, and we show a lot of them in our movie, A Clockwork Shining, which is available on Amazon Prime and on Apple TV. If you can't get it in the country that you're from, which is only available in the UK and the United States right now, but if you can get Apple TV, you can also watch it. Um, we show a lot of the continuity errors within The Shining in our movie. One of the ones is the sticker disappearing on Danny's door, the carpet changing when Danny stands up in the hallway, a chair disappears behind Jack, light switches just kind of, go missing. There's a light switch just underneath the picture before Jack walks into Allman's office in the beginning of the movie. Later on, when Jack walks into the office to destroy the radio to prevent Danny and Wendy from leaving the mountain, from leaving the hotel, the light switch is gone. There's another one that there's a light switch underneath the storage room when Halloran is giving Wendy and Danny a tour of the hotel, and he's like, "Here's the storage room," and which we have a thing in our documentary that I don't think anyone has really ever picked up on, is that Halloran doesn't really seem like he says storage room. It sounds like he says story room. Now, this is the story room. And we show that in the documentary, which is really interesting because from that point in the film, The Shining, that's when things really start to pick up and take a really dark turn within the movie. That's when, Grady is pretty much telling Jack like that he needs to eliminate Wendy and Danny. Before it was kind of like persuasion. He was kind of like, you need to correct them, sir. Just like I corrected my two daughters, blah, blah, blah. It's a horrible impression, but you get the point. And there's a light switch that's it's either an outlet or a light switch on beside the door. And then later on, when Wendy is carrying Jack's body into the storage room, the light switch is gone. And there's a few other ones that I kind of forgot to put in the movie, like in the very beginning, which is the establishing shot of the Overlook Hotel. There's which was filmed at Timberline Lodge in Oregon. Some of the exterior shots, the rest of it was filmed in England on sets. But the first establishing shot, you don't see a maze in the background, but later on, obviously, there's a maze in the background. So there's so much to this film, and we don't explicitly say it in the movie, but it seems as if Kubrick is putting in these continuity errors on purpose, because that's been the question for a really long time with these people that have researched The Shining over and over and over again, and has talked about all these theories. They're like, why are these continuity errors there? They don't make any sense, especially when it comes to Stanley Kubrick being a perfectionist and, being a master filmmaker and wanting everything to be perfect within his movies. It seems odd that there would be so many of these continuity errors within the film. And what we kind of propose within the movie A Clockwork Shining is that Kubrick is purposefully putting these continuity errors in there to make the audience question their reality, just as Jack is also questioning his reality within the movie. So it's not only in an experiment, and that's subliminally, because the first watch through, you don't really notice these continuity errors, but they're hitting you subconsciously. And that's really what we don't explicitly say that, but that's something that the audience needs to put two and two together on while they're watching our movie, while they're watching our documentary. And that's one of the things that I love the most about Stanley Kubrick, is not only that he is able to, not only is he a great filmmaker and tells great stories. Well, he did tell great stories. He's been passed away, but that he doesn't give the entire movie away in the exposition of the movie. That's where a lot of movies ruin themselves nowadays. They give everything away within the dialogue of the movie, and that leads to no mystery surrounding what you're watching. And that's the opposite of what Stanley Kubrick was trying to do with really all of his movies. And that's why he avoided doing interviews as well, because he didn't want to tell the people that were listening exactly what the movie was about. He wanted people to put two and two together on their own and create their own theories and their own ideas surrounding his work and surrounding the movies that he made.
Well, speaking of Stanley Kubrick, you have films like Eyes Wide Shut, A Clockwork Orange, and these are somewhat conspiratorial topics that are covered in these films. And you have discovered some interesting things about Stanley Kubrick himself through research for this film, including possible intelligence ties. Is that right?
Yes, we actually did we didn't go so heavy on Stanley Kubrick. There's a lot of things that we could have put in there that would not have shined a really good light on Stanley Kubrick, but we chose not to really put a lot of those in there, because it's really a lot of speculation and theorizing when it comes to the types of things that Stanley Kubrick may or may not have been doing behind closed doors. So, but we do have a document in the movie, A Clockwork Shining, where it shows that he is being looked at for some unknown governmental project along with four other filmmakers. And in the document, it says that Kubrick is being looked at and he's the most promising out of all of these filmmakers. And Kubrick also lived in LA for a period of time with his uncle, Martin Prevelaire, and then we also bring in Lookout Mountain Air Force Base, which I think is a really important part of the documentary, because there used to be a hotel that set on the grounds of where the Lookout Mountain Air Force Base was. And if people aren't familiar with Lookout Mountain Air Force Base, it was basically a studio. It was a military Air Force studio where they would shoot a lot of films and more films that were ever made in Hollywood up until that point, which is really staggering. A lot of them are classified. People had top secret clearance for the place. Marilyn Monroe had top secret clearance. Ronald Reagan, James Stewart, Cary Grant. A lot of these famous big time actors had top secret clearance, and no one really knows what they were doing up there. And but that is the place where the atomic test footage was shot. That's where, which was done on models. They weren't actually filming a a nuclear bomb dropping and exploding. I mean, people are familiar with that. People already know about that, but it's just, they don't know where it was filmed and that it was, done on little tiny sets and little tiny models because, like, the first thing that gives that away that it's not a real atomic bomb is like, how does the camera get destroyed? You're telling me that this atomic bomb destroys an entire house and all the surrounding areas, but it doesn't destroy the camera? Like, give me a break. It was all filmed at Lookout Mountain Air Force
Mm.
Studio, but there was a hotel that's set there before the Air Force brought in and made their military base there, which had a lot of film studios, recording studios. It had a nuclear bunker underneath it, a helicopter pad. It was like a state of the art military base. And just so happens to be positioned directly on top of Laurel Canyon, which is where all of these famous Hollywood people lived in the 60s. But there used to be a hotel that sat there that was called Lookout Mountain Hotel. And we show it in our film how Lookout Mountain Hotel looked very similar to the Overlook Hotel within Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And Lookout Mountain Hotel in Laurel Canyon burnt to the ground. And in the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, the Lookout Overlook Hotel burns to the ground.
Right on.
So it's like all these coincidences are just kind of like adding up here, and uh, there's so many things that I mean, there's so many theories about what the I mean. Jay Weidner basically created the whole idea and the theory that Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was a confession for faking the moon
Mm.
landing, and he does provide pretty good evidence for that with Danny standing up in the hallway, the carpet looking like the Apollo 11 launch pad, him wearing the Apollo 11 shirt, him going into room 237, room 237,000 miles away was what people thought that the distance between the Earth and the moon at that time. So a lot of it makes sense, but when you read it through the lens of the things that we've discovered within the movie, it really but it doesn't discount the other theories that people have had about The Shining, because I think a lot of them are still correct. It's just an experiment. Stanley Kubrick is running an experiment. He's not only running an experiment while he's making the movie by rewriting the script as he's filming the movie. Nobody would ever
Mm.
do that, ever. Like, why would you be rewriting a script while you're shooting the movie? It just causes a lot of problems and a lot of issues. But we theorize and posturize within the movie that, Kubrick was kind of pushed to take The Shining by Warner
Well,
Brothers.
yeah, I was just about to say, you mentioned in the film that he was kind of forced to do the film, and it was very well known that he did not like Stephen King's work at all. You also mentioned how the first script he submitted was approved, but then he completely altered the entire thing as the film was being made.
Yeah, and that's a really big point that we make in the movie, because Warner Brothers had a really successful movie with The Exorcist and William Friedkin, which The Exorcist is based off of a book and supposedly off of a true story, though that story has been debunked. That true story has been debunked several times. The person that was involved, the movie was supposed to be about, never even existed. So it's like the entire thing was just concocted in like a huge fabrication. But regardless, William Friedkin directed the movie The Exorcist, and it was a smash success. It was a really big success, and Warner Brothers was kind of like, "Hey, we have this." We have a pre-published copy of Stephen King's The Shining. Why don't you take this and you consider doing it for your next film? Because he had just come off of Barry Lyndon, and Barry Lyndon lost a lot of money. It did not do well in theaters. It was not a critical success or an audience success. So Warner Brothers was kind of like, here, read this and see, kind of not, I don't think really telling him that he has to do it, but kind of pushing him in that direction, because that's kind of how, people do. They'll just kind of plant a seed and be like, here, do this and go in this direction. And so we theorize that it's highly likely that Kubrick wrote a script for Warner Brothers that was completely different than the script that he was wanting to do, because he inevitably rewrote it. And that original script was more akin to Stephen King's book, The Shining, with all the paranormal aspects of The Shining. And that's a big reason why Stephen King did not like it, but he did not see the things that we have seen and what this documentary is about, so he doesn't really understand it. And I feel like that if he did understand it, he would have a change of attitude, which he has kind of changed his perspective over the years, probably because Warner Brothers ended up giving him a large amount of money to shut up about it, because all he was doing was trashing it. He was like, the only thing I liked about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was Jack Nicholson's performance. The rest of it was garbage. It's not a direct quote, but that's just the way that he, would talk about The Shining in interviews. And Warner Brothers is kind of like, yo, you can't be, trash talking our movie like you're doing. And so that was probably influence for Kubrick to change the script, because it's been talked about how Kubrick he was sort of an atheist, and he didn't really actually believe in the supernatural or believe in the paranormal. So it makes more sense that he wanted to make things realistic. And we do know that about Kubrick, that he wanted his sets and the actors and the things that he was doing a movie on to be hyper realistic. All the props that he would use in his movies weren't actually props. They were like real products. They were everything in that storage room in The Shining was all like real food. And so I think that and there's so many other things that we point out within the movie, like Catcher in the Rye. Wendy is the first time we meet Wendy and Danny in the movie. She's reading a book by an intelligence officer named Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye has been reported to be a mind control Manchurian candidate, MK Ultra trigger for assassinations. Mark David Chapman, John Hinckley were both. It was both found on the scene of two major assassinations that happened within a year of the release of The Shining, which was John Lennon and the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. And then when you look at, because Jack is really, it seems like that he's like going he's spiraling into these, types of delusions. But whenever you watch The Shining again, and we put it in the documentary, when the first 10 minutes of The Shining between Ullman, Bill Watson, and Jack Torrance within The Shining really kind of give away the entire plot of the movie between that interaction there. And a lot of people think that that's the most like boring part of the movie, but they're telling you that exactly what's going to happen. I mean, Ullman looks identical to JFK in the movie, which, excuse me, I don't think was an accident. I think Stanley Kubrick purposefully made him look like JFK. And the thing is that Ullman is mentioning to Jack, like, this isn't a physically demanding job. This is more of a psychological job because of the isolation. And a lot of people can't handle the isolation up here at the Overlook during the winter season. And then he goes on to tell him about Charles Grady, and which is a really interesting thing that was just brought up on a show that I was doing previously, is that Charles Grady's name changes within the movie. First, it's Charles Grady when Ullman is talking about it, but then when Jack and Grady are talking in the bathroom, his name is Delbert Grady. So very interesting there. Something that I didn't really catch. Another Mark Devlin. We just did an interview with Mark Devlin the other day, me and Jay Widener, and Mark brought that up, which I thought was really interesting. Maybe his full name is Charles Delbert Grady, and then but they didn't say Charles Grady, but Ullman says Charles Grady. Later on, he's referred to as Delbert Grady. It's just a really interesting thing that I don't think that a lot of people really notice.
While we're on some of the strange symbolism in the film that may indicate that Kubrick is signaling to a mind control program, what else did you guys show in the film that may point to this?
Well, there were several things that I saw that no one has ever seen before and has never talked about. Like when Jack is in the gold room for the second time and he's talking to Lloyd, the bartender, and there's that party that's going on there with all the people. Whenever Jack gets up and he turns around before Grady spills the alcohol on Jack, there's a lady that walks past it. Looks like she has a bloody handprint on her ass. Now, people have disputed this and said that it's not really a bloody handprint, but it looks like a bloody handprint. So, regardless if it's a part of the dress or not a part of the dress, it looks like a bloody handprint. Okay, so give me a break. So, she's actually the person that bumps into Grady that makes him spill the alcohol on Jack.
Hmm.
Another thing that we seen was the first time that they were in the gold room when Ullman is giving a tour to Danny and not Danny, Jack and Wendy, uh, around the overlook, and they walk into the gold room. On the very back wall, there's a Nazi swastika that's in the that's like kind of like blended into the back wall that no one has ever seen, which then correlates to what others have already pointed out about The Shining, which is at the very end of the movie, when the far away picture fades to the close up picture of Jack, there's for a split second you can see a tiny little Hitler mustache on Jack's face, and also Jack is typing on a German typewriter. So there's a lot of because with Project Paperclip and the German Nazis coming over into the United States and basically forming NASA and like all these other and basically taking the experiments from the United States and then putting them, I mean, from Germany and putting them to the United States. Germany was among the first group of people that were trying to figure out mind control.
Mm.
So all of that kind of adds up. And then there's also not something that I seen, but that somebody else seen, but they interpreted it wrong. Whenever Danny first sees the twins in the movie, there's a poster on the wall on the left-hand side. And if you zoom in, underneath the poster says the word monarch. And again, I wasn't the first person to notice the poster, but everybody that has noticed it before relates it to Monarch Mountain in Colorado. They relate it to this Minotaur, this Kubrick stair. None of them have ever mentioned before Monarch MK Ultra mind control, which we have Kathy O'Brien, one of the probably the most credible survivor of Monarch MK Ultra mind control in the movie, and she talks about her experiences. So when you add all of these things together with the psychic driving that is going on with Jack, Jack has been made to he thinks Wendy thinks that he's writing a novel this entire time, but he's really not writing a novel. It's one of the most famous scenes in the movie when Wendy comes into the lobby and is looking through Jack's all of his his work and all that, and she sees that he's just writing the same sentence over and over and over again. Uh, that is a form of psychic driving. That's an MK Ultra technique that was done by Hugh and Cameron in Canada. That was one of the things that he was most famous for, and it's to put a certain phrase or idea or thought into somebody's head to convince them to do whatever they want them to do. And this is a real life manifestation, because in 1968, when Sirhan killed RFK, that exact same thing was done in real life. Sirhan's notebook was discovered, and all it had written all over it was RFK must die, RFK must die, RFK must die, over and over and over again. So Jack within The Shining is writing out his own version of psychic driving, just like Sirhan Sirhan was doing whenever before he killed RFK.
In the film, you also discuss the Laurel Canyon scene and the mega music acts to come out of that scene, and possibly some sort of mind control programs that some of these mega artists may have been subjected to, along with the fact that many of them have family members or parents with very high military connections.
It's not just some of them; it's all of them in the '60s. And that's the shock and wow factor that I'm getting from a lot of people that have seen it. Because, and I was even shocked and wowed with it whenever I was first watching it, Chris. Whenever I was making the movie, I was kind of shocked by it because I'm like, man, this really explains why that no matter how good you are at any given thing, no matter how great you could possibly be, it's more possible that you're never going to make it because you don't have the right connections. You don't have the right people behind you. You don't have the right people backing you. Your family is not a part of the right group of people. And that's what we find with so many of the musicians that came up in the '60s out of Laurel Canyon. All of they all had a family member, or mostly their dad, their father. Like Jim Morrison's dad was responsible for the Gulf of Tonkin incident, false flag that got us into Vietnam War, that killed thousands of people. And that really makes sense because the way that Jim Morrison was acting, Jim Morrison was just like a loose cannon. He was just kind of doing whatever he wanted to do. And the reason that he was able to do that, and anytime that he ever got arrested, he was immediately let out because he knew that any trouble that he would get into, he would automatically be gotten out of because his dad is this high up military naval intelligence officer. Several of them. Sharon Tate's dad was also a high up military intelligence officer. We know that the CIA was responsible for, giving, making LSD popular and going through different channels to spread LSD into the public. And then they were responsible for creating that monster. And then they were like, okay, well, which was to completely destroy the anti-war movement of that time. And then whenever things got out of hand with the hippie movement, they're like, oh no, what do we do? How do we get out of this scenario? Well, I know what we'll do. We'll just inject some serial killers and some murderers and crime into this whole thing and then make it to where people don't want to be a part of it anymore because it's associated with crime, destruction, murder, serial killers. And that's what they did with the Sharon Tate Manson murders.
It's also speculated, not only in your film, but with many researchers that I've spoken with, that a lot of the famous serial killers from our recent history may have been subjects of some of these mind control programs.
But serial killers are starting to become super popular and hyper popular right now. I've watched 3 movies in the past week that are brand new movies that are about serial killers. And of course, serial killer documentary and true crime is soaring right now. It's heavily popular, and it makes sense that they could have been responsible for the creation of at least a lot of these types of serial killers, and which stands to reason that they could do that and then just kind of sit back and be like, okay, well, somebody is going to come out and mimic this. So really they only have to push a couple people in that kind of direction to commit these types of crimes. And then they just sit back and then other people are going to get that idea in their head and they're going to go out and do it as well. So that's a little, snippet of how these things work and how agents work. They're not there to actually completely fabricate an entire thing to the point that every little detail is measured out. They're just there to push you in a certain direction, to plant a seed in order for you to capitalize. They just capitalize on people that they want to be able to push into a certain direction. And that's what I think.
Yeah, it's like these high-impact psychological events, including serial killers. They have this effect on the collective consciousness, and it causes the collective to be steered in certain directions and for certain agendas to be able to be pushed through just a little bit easier. You have to look at a bigger picture of a lot of this stuff to even be able to understand the possibility that this could be happening.
Yeah, I would really recommend Dave McGowan's books. I'm trying to find the name of that. We show it in our movie. It's like Program
That's
to
it. Okay.
Kill is the name of the book. Program to Kill.
Right on.
And Mark Devlin within the movie is a really big study on Dave McGowan's work. He actually went to Laurel Canyon with Greg Carlwood from the Higher Side Chats. They did like a whole episode of traveling through Laurel Canyon and going up there and stuff. And me and Jay Widener actually went up in there too. And it's like it's kind of a dump up in there now. It's like it's not a good place to be, which all of LA
Yeah.
is kind of like a dump, which is why we need to support independent filmmakers and people that are doing this independently. Now is our time to really uh, create new things and put new things out there, and hopefully people will support and hopefully people will check it
I
out.
agree 100%. You mentioned Catcher in the Rye earlier. This has been such a strange connection with many assassinations throughout our recent history. And you speculate in the film that it may be possible that this could be some sort of trigger or at least associated heavily with these programs.
Yeah, Joe Atwell, which is also in the movie. We have Walter Bosley, which is an AFOSI agent, Air Force special agent in the movie. We have Joe Atwell, which is a author and researcher. We have Kathy O'Brien, which is a Monarch MK Ultra survivor, and we have Mark Devlin, which is an author and a researcher, and myself and Jay Widener in the movie as well. So Catcher in the Rye has been associated with two major assassinations, John Lennon and the attempted assassination with Ronald Reagan. And I actually have a book here that Mark David Chapman, after he had killed John Lennon, here's the book, 100 Most Famous Criminals. After he had shot and killed John Lennon, he sat on the street and started reading Catcher in the Rye until the police showed up. And then in his defense in court, he stood up and he said, if you want to know the reason why I committed this act, then all you got to do is read Catcher in the Rye. And then a few years later, a psychologist or a psychiatrist went in to meet with Mark David Chapman in prison, and he was still reading Catcher in the Rye. So this in Catcher in the Rye is one of the most popular books in American history. It's required reading for if you were in public school, which is insane when you think about it. But Joe Atwell within our movie, A Clockwork Shining, he has a different interpretation of what was going on with Catcher in the Rye. He believes that he's decoded it to the point to where he thinks that it's telling the story of the Masonic trajectory of a member going through the ranks and going through the lodge, because it has a lot of the same types of symbolism within there. And Kubrick has a lot of Freemasonic symbolism in a lot of his movies as well. So if you want to get the full interpretation of what Joe Atwell believes is going on within Catcher in the Rye, then you're going to have to watch our movie on Amazon Prime.
Going back to the possibility of some sort of mind control experiment going on at the Overlook Hotel, you speculate in the film that, like in the MK Ultra experimentation, there could have been some sort of psychedelic substance like LSD distributed to the family somehow.
Yes, there's real life examples of LSD being used on unknown, unwitting unwitting people, entire groups of unwitting people that have no idea that they're being dosed with LSD. And this goes back to some of the very first MK Ultra experiments that were done on the army, which they were kind of just told that they were going to be a part of, biological weapons testing. They didn't know that they were going to be pumped up with a lot of these hallucinogenic drugs, and one of those drugs is called BZ, which BZ is like 100 times more powerful than LSD. It would make people lose their minds for long periods of time, like weeks at a time. And they would also do open air testing with this. They would like simulate an entire military operation, and then they would just spray this BZ on all of the soldiers that were a part of this simulated operation, and they would like lose their minds for long periods. And that's the thing with, you know, taking LSD or some kind of psychedelic. Whenever you knowingly take it, you can expect that you're going to have some kind of change, some kind of head change. You're going to expect some sort of physiological change within your body and within your mind. But if you're unknowingly dosed with some sort of hallucinogenic drug, you're going to think that you're losing your mind. And what we theorize and talk about within the movie is that it's a high possibility that Lloyd, the bartender, dosed Jack's drink with LSD. And this is a very known thing. Operation Midnight Climax was this very thing. They did this exact same thing. They had this brothel set up where they would hire the prostitutes to unknowingly dose these John's alcoholic drinks with LSD. And then you have Frank Olson as well that we talk about in the documentary, where Sidney Gottlieb, the head of the MK Ultra programs, unknowingly spiked his alcoholic drink with LSD, and then he jumped out of the window of his hotel room and died. So there's so many real life examples of LSD and these different psychedelic drugs being used on the public unknowingly. And then there's also even an instance where the CIA sprayed an LSD aerosol on a whole CIA party.
Yeah.
Unknowingly. So we have all these real life examples of this, and it only makes sense when you look at the way that The Shining is set up, and when Jack first experiences what could be considered supernatural or paranormal things. It's only after he takes that alcoholic drink from Lloyd the bartender, and Wendy comes into the gold room and was like, Danny was attacked by a woman upstairs in one of the empty rooms. So he goes upstairs into room 237. And when you walk into room 237, when you see it in the movie, it's unlike anything else that you had seen in the entire movie. Everything is super psychedelic. The colors of the carpet are very vivid. It's different than anything else, any of the other sets that you see around the inside of the Overlook Hotel. And he sees the very attractive woman, which the attractive woman then turns into an elderly lady. He kind of freaks out and goes out of the room, and then goes to his room with Wendy, his little apartment room, and walks in. And Wendy asked him, "Did you see anything? Did you find anything? See anything?" And he's like, "No, I didn't see anything." So it's like he either knows that this is some kind of an experiment. And again, Kubrick is not only doing an experiment within the movie, as he's rewriting the movie, he's doing an experiment on the actors and the way that he treated Shelley Duvall, which is very reminiscent of a way that you would tear somebody down in some sort of MK Ultra experiment. But it's also an experiment on the audience, so it's a triple whammy. He's not only hitting you with he's hitting you from all directions.
As you said earlier, you had Kathy O'Brien on, and she also discussed how these programs would initiate trauma on the victims until they would disassociate, and it would also involve LSD oftentimes, but trauma was the key to getting the person to dissociate enough to where they may even be able to have some sort of psychic abilities, right?
Yeah, and that's what we theorize within the movie because it's speculated that between the doctor that comes to check out Danny in the beginning of the film at Wendy and Jack's apartment in Boulder, she's basically like, this is due to some sort of self hypnosis that Danny is, developing these kinds of abilities. And then the doctor asks Wendy, when did he start experiencing these types of abilities and these types of visions and in this these problems? And she said, well, it was after Jack broke Danny's arm. So the abuse by Jack toward Danny has inadvertently created these types of psychic abilities that Danny has within The Shining. And the trauma is always the key when trying to unlock these certain psychic abilities. And we know this for a fact that several MK Ultra programs, sub-projects were interested in these types of psychic abilities. They were trying to break down the mental psyche of people to try and unlock or discover or bring to the forefront of the consciousness of the individual to be able to tap in to these certain psychic abilities. So it's not, and then, Jack later admits that later on in the film when he's talking to Lloyd, the bartender, for the first time, and he says that, yeah, I did hurt Danny. I did break Danny's arm. And there's this weird tension between Jack and Danny throughout the entire movie, like some kind of weird creepy tension that's going on there. And also, which we didn't put in the movie, but other people have pointed out in the beginning when uh, Jack is waiting for Bill Watson, which Bill Watson is. It's so interesting because Bill Watson really doesn't do anything in the entire movie. He says like maybe one or two words. It's like, why is he even in there? And it seems like his character is kind of he's kind of the director of the operation, like the experiment, the CIA experiment that's going on up at the Overlook. And his resemblance to Sidney Gottlieb, which is the head of the MK Ultra programs, it's uncanny what's going on there. And we didn't put that in the movie because there really wasn't any place to kind of fit it in there. It was already almost a 2 hour long movie, which I could have made it like 3 or 4 hours, but didn't think that anybody wanted to watch a 3 hour, 4 hour long documentary, which is another thing about being an editor. You got to know when to take certain things out and when to put certain things in the runtime on any given topic. But I think that worked out for the best. But you got this operation with whenever Jack is waiting for Ullman and Bill Watson to come and get their bags, Jack is reading a Playgirl magazine out in the open. He's reading a Playgirl
I
magazine.
never noticed that.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to go.
Which
back
other
and
people
watch
have pointed.
that, man.
Yeah, and what type of person, reads a Playgirl magazine? I know.
Yeah, man.
So there you go. That kind of connects the nature of Jack and what he's
I
doing.
found it very interesting. You mentioned the somewhat abusive treatment of Shelley Duvall by Stanley Kubrick, and you also showed that in interviews with Jack Nicholson and others, he wasn't treating them that way. I find it strange that he singled out a woman to be somewhat abusive to during the film. Any thoughts on that?
Well, his excuse is that he was trying to get a better performance out of Shelley Duvall. That he didn't think that she was that great of an actor. And there's several times within the behind the scenes footage of The Shining, which we show some of in our movie, that Stanley Kubrick thinks that Shelley Duvall's, a lot of her acting looks fake. He's mentioned that several times to Shelley Duvall. He's like, you can't jump on every time he hits a line because it looks too fake, Shelley. Then we have the whole scene in our movie where he's basically berating Shelley Duvall for, you know, not being there on time and not doing what she's supposed to do, and how she's holding everybody up, and that it's kind of like making it not worth it for him. And Shelley Duvall was really affected by that. Her acting career was pretty much over after that movie came out. She was in a few other things afterwards, but it never took off. And that's a real life example of something affecting reality that's within a movie. And there's tons of examples of that with Stanley Kubrick's movie. A Clockwork Orange did that same thing. After A Clockwork Orange got released overseas in the UK and a few other different countries, crimes skyrocketed. There was more burglaries, there was murders that was associated with A Clockwork Orange. So far to the point that Stanley Kubrick pulled it. He pulled the movie from several countries. And then we also talk about Sue Lyon within the movie, which has to do with Lolita, and Lolita being a movie that is essentially about pedophilia. And then in real life, Sue Lyon, the person that's a star in Stanley Kubrick's movie, that is about her being sexually abused by an older man, is actually being sexually abused by an older man in real
Mm-hmm.
life, one of Kubrick's producers in the movie.
Yeah.
It's wild. There's so many of these echoing effects between Stanley Kubrick's movies and real life. I mean, we just mentioned Catcher in the Rye. Catcher in the Rye. The Shining came out in 1980. The two assassinations, the one attempt on Ronald Reagan and the other one on the one that actually went through on John Lennon, was around a year after the movie came out. So how did Stanley Kubrick know to put Catcher in the Rye in The
Mm.
Shining? How did he know that this was going to be a big controversy and that these assassins were going to be continuously reading Catcher in the Rye?
Not to give too much away, but you also discuss briefly about a missing scene that could have further clues to the real meaning of the film.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick had a completely different ending to The Shining that was filmed and was released to some of the first test screenings of The Shining, and the excuse was by Stanley that the audience reactions weren't what he wanted them to be. When the movie ended, the audience would just get up and immediately leave and not sit around with their friends and with their family to try and discuss what the movie meant, which, Kubrick was really well known for doing that. He wanted to create a mystery within his movies, and he wanted people to discuss his movies and create their own theories and speculations. He wanted it to be a mystery because he didn't treat the audience like they were stupid, like many people do nowadays. And so he decided to have his editor go to the theaters and splice the reel to cut out this original ending of the movie. And we know for a fact that there was a different ending because there are photographs of the original ending, and we also have the script of the original ending. And this original ending to the movie, we believe, was cut out because it completely reveals the entire plot of the movie and really hammers home the fact that this is not what we think that it is. It is something completely different. This is a psychological operation that's happening up at the Overlook. This doesn't have anything to do with ghost or paranormal or supernatural things. This is these people that are portrayed as ghosts that we think are ghosts are really actors. They're LARPers. Have you seen the movie Shutter
Yeah,
Island?
yeah.
Okay, so if you remember Shutter Island, the entire premise of the movie is that Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a an
Mm.
investigator. So he shows up on this island at this insane asylum to investigate a murder on the property. And spoiler alert for Shutter Island. If you haven't seen it, then it's been out for a
Yeah,
long
it's
time.
okay.
Uh, it turns out at the end of Shutter Island that all of the people within the movie are LARPing their positions. They're actors. And Leonardo DiCaprio's character within the movie is actually a patient at the hospital. So that's essentially what's going on with The Shining. These people that are there are really actors,
Yeah.
and they're real physical human beings. Other than some of the hallucinations that Jack might be going through, and some of the hallucinations that Danny might be going through, and that's why we bring in the LSD aerosol and we show the examples of that happening in real life. So it's a possibility that there is some kind of aerosol that's also being sprayed in room 237, and that might have been how but Danny is also a psychic. Um, he has psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, whatever you want to call them. He receives visions, or he's able to remote view, or whatever you want to classify it as. But it makes sense that Danny would be able to see these things because he's really young and he's a psychic ability. He has psychic abilities, but uh, they're actors in this movie. They're not ghosts. They're not apparitions. They're not ghouls and goblins, and that is what I think really pissed off Stephen
Mm.
King within the movie, because he wanted this to be about the paranormal aspects and the hauntings and the maze coming alive and being a monster in the back and grabbing them and all that. But we see how that turned out with his Shining
Oh, that was
miniseries
awful.
that he did. It was god awful. I can't even
Yeah.
watch it. I can't even watch the first episode of it. It's freaking horrible. And another reason might be too is because people thought that Stanley Kubrick was going to maybe film The Shining at the Stanley Hotel in
Mm.
Colorado, but then he decided not to. So, but hey, they got Stephen King's version of The Shining in that miniseries filmed at the Stanley Hotel.
Yeah. Well,
So,
still one of the best movies of all time. When it comes to Kubrick himself, and I know we'll never really know this, the man is no longer with us, but do you think he was really trying to bring attention to this, or may he have been part of some sort of more sinister program?
well, he would have had to have known about the CIA's MK Ultra programs just based on the fact that he made a Clockwork
Yeah, yeah.
Orange. Like that entire movie is about MK Ultra and mind
Yeah, that's not even
controlling
veiled
Alex,
right
the
there.
main.
It's straight up.
Yeah, it's just straight up
Yeah.
saying it. And there's also a part in Clockwork Orange where it says, it almost says the word adrenochrome. It says adrenochrome. It's on the top of
Interesting.
like a header of like a building that says
Hmm.
adrenochrome. So he had to have been aware at least of some of these programs, and it's quite possible that he was trying to expose it to a certain degree, but it just shows you the long lasting symbolic nature of his movies that it's just now being
Hmm.
discovered.
Well, let's close on this.
Um,
Do you think that it's possible that these mind control programs are still being carried out in any capacity? I often wonder if they even need to, with technology we have, social media, the ease of access to pharmaceutical drugs that people have. I'm sure that they have the knowledge and know how to, in a way, control them remotely with the level of our technology these days. What do you think?
yeah, I think that I mean, I don't want to beat a broken record here or beat a dead horse, but they pretty much figured it out on an individual level, and then they just expanded it to a worldwide thing. But you're right; they no longer really need to do this on an individual level anymore because they can just basically control and manipulate the population through social media by curating what people see, what they can find, and what they can know. And it seems like that it's just one large MK Ultra operation that's being just run on everyone collectively, and that causes so much confusion within people that they no longer know what to believe. And that's also a part of our documentary as well, with the Yuri Bezmenov clip that we put in there from the early 80s after Kathy O'Brien talking about the MK Ultra being put into our school systems. We then show a clip of Yuri Bezmenov talking about that. If we can pump enough Marxist Leninism ideology into the soft heads of young people, then those people are going to grow up in 18 years, and those kids are now going to be the ones that will be influencing policy. They'll be the leaders of the country. They'll be the ones that are in positions of power. They will be the political cabinet members. They will be the ones that are essentially in control of the country. And he said that that's one of the main ways to completely ideologically subvert an entire country is you have to control the educational system.
Well, I really enjoyed the film. Before you head out, let the audience know once again where they can get the movie and all of your content.
Yes, you can get the movie Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime Video. You can also get it on Apple TV Plus. Please help support my work and independent filmmakers' work. Like I was mentioning earlier, Hollywood is basically dead.
Shit the bed.
They're not putting out good work. They're done. They're fried. They're burnt. And please support independent filmmakers and purchase our movie A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime. And if you're in another country that it's not available in, if you click the link, hopefully we can get a link in the description for the movie. I'm planning on posting it on my end as well, so the link will be in the description. If you can't get it in your country, it's not available on Amazon Prime. If you click the link, sometimes if you're in the UK and the United States, you'll be able to get it for sure. But if you're anywhere else, then you're probably not going to be able to get it. But if Apple TV Plus is available in your country, you can get it on there. And if it's not, then we will be figuring out a way to make it available for people everywhere in the world here soon, hopefully in a couple of months. But if you would like to listen to some more of my work, you can find me at Raised by Giants on YouTube and all podcast platforms. And if you would like to reach out to me personally on X, Twitter, at Raised by Giants 8, and on Instagram at Raised by Giants Pod. Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for watching my movie, brother. Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks again for coming on. We'll do it again, of course. And until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Hallucinogenic drugs, hypnosis, electric shocks to the brain.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
Some of the methods used in secret CIA mind control experiments.
There are many theories as to what The Shining is really about, from the faking of the moon landing to Native American genocide and the Holocaust.
Now, if he did fake the Apollo moon landing, then he probably has really deep connections into the intelligence world. Why are there these gigantic continuity errors in this movie?
The occulted meaning has to be comprehensible. It's just hidden, usually in a very systematic way, so that it could be understood by someone coming along later on who knows what the real meaning is supposed to be.
We believe that there's something even more sinister lurking beneath the surface of this masterful film.
So Lookout Mountain Hotel looked a lot like the Overlook Hotel.
you realise that there's no such thing as coincidences like that.
As Lookout Mountain Studios, ran by the Air Force.
That told the story of nuclear weapons testing by the United States.
Of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, the Air Force was known to be the most excited, the most turned on by MKUltra and its prospects.
Reportedly, there were more films made at Lookout Mountain than at all the other film studios in Hollywood.
We really don't know what these famous film directors were being recruited for, what project or whatever. Was it the moon landing?
The CIA's MKUltra programs were admitted to the public in 1975, 5 years before the release of The Shining.
These experiments were done without the informed consent of the patients.
Look at some UFO cases, and the things that are reported tells me that MKUltra is likely being applied.
In my MKUltra mind control experience, I was taken to various military, NASA, and DARPA installations for sophisticated mind control programming.
Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Ronald Reagan. Nobody really knows what they were doing up there.
As well as high-ranking military and Department of Defense personnel.
What people don't realize is that many of the people that worked with Kubrick also worked with Kennedy. This is actually the smoking gun proving that Kubrick was working with the government.
These were all CIA-sponsored experiments.
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
And putting little symbolic, cryptic clues and Easter eggs pertaining to the fact that they're still doing it.
These clues include a hidden swastika in the background of the gold room.
What was the setup, what it was being told, and realize that it was a lie all along.
But right there in the narrative, in the dialogue, they're telling you that this was a very real program coming out of those nice folks at the CIA.
Here's Johnny!